I hereby call to order the Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023 meeting of the Commission on Race and Access to Opportunity. Members, please silence your cell phones if you would, and also acknowledge our lead staff, Brandon White, and Committee Assistant, Brett Gillespie. We're honored to have the two of you here. Brett, would you please call the roll?
Senator Berg? Present. Senator Neal? Here. Senator Westerfield? Here. Representative Brown? Representative Heverin? Representative Kulkarni? Mr. Coleman? Here. Mr. Davis? Ms. Drake? Dr. Jones? Mr. Roberts? Co-Chair Gibbons?
Present.
Co-Chair Timoney?
Here.
We do have a quorum and are hereby commissioned to do business. Before we move into the segment of the meeting and the agenda, which is an exciting, aggressive agenda that I'm appreciative of the work that staff has done to put together, are there any members that have any recognitions or introductions they wish to make? I'm going to take a prerogative as the chair. We do have a roast that we have to do today in observation of someone who is pulling the parachute, jumping out of the plane, landing in another place. And so if any of you in the course of the meeting have anything to say about our colleague who is departing today, Erwin, we've certainly been honored to have you join us, and we appreciate your work. Would you like to say a few words, please?
Yes, thank you, man. You made it sound like I was going off to war or something there. I don't know. Thank you, Chair. It's been an honor to serve on this commission. Obviously, from the beginning, a lot of great work's been done. I know a lot of great work is still to come, and certainly I'll be in a different capacity in my new position, but I will be following the great work of this group. And if there's ever anything I can do to assist or help in any way, please let me know. I'd be happy to do that. It's important work. Thank you.
Thank you, and you are truly a class act. The communication works both ways. If you see or sense something that we need to know, please reach out to any of us, share that information with us, and thank you for your dedication. You have been a steady regular at every meeting, and I appreciate that very much. That matters. All right, I remind all of us, the commission purpose statement is always in our folder, and we like to start with that because it sort of reorients us as we embark on another meeting. The purpose of the commission shall be to conduct studies and research on issues where disparities may exist across the sectors of educational equity, child welfare, health, economic opportunity, juvenile justice, criminal justice, and any other sectors that are deemed relevant in an effort to identify areas of improvement in providing services and opportunities for minority communities. First order of business on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the July 24th meeting. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Let the record reflect that the minutes have been approved for the July 24th meeting. We have an agenda today involving post-secondary education, diversity, equity, inclusion, and the Kentucky Chamber Foundation's Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and we're honored to have two presenters here at the table. I would ask the two of these esteemed friends of ours to introduce yourselves for the record, and please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aaron Thompson, the president of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education.
And I'm Eli Capilouto, president of the University of Kentucky.
We want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation with you. We want to also thank you for having such a commission. And for us to not realize that, in fact, we're in a place in society that we have to pay some attention to what we're doing with our citizens is really important. And we want to say that higher education truly is what I call the great equalizer. Our goal in what we're doing in post-secondary education in the state is to do exactly that. And let me give you some stuff. I only have 3 small slides, and I'll turn it over to my esteemed colleague to finish up the presentation. But I will just put it in perspective for you. If our job in this state is to provide the best welfare for all of our citizens, we have to take into account all those things that doesn't lead up to that. What we know is, and this is factual, that the best route to a strong economy And to a good, highly educated workforce is a good, strong post-secondary system that focuses on all of our citizens. We take them where we get them. And our job is to make sure that we get them to a finish line with a quality education that they can add to Kentucky. If we don't do that, guess what happens? This General Assembly will appropriate more money to prisons, appropriate more money to unemployment. You will appropriate more money to Medicaid. I'll keep on going. So this is a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis. I'm a sociologist, so I won't go into all the value of the conversation at hand. I'll just take an economic value system. So when we came in 5-6 years ago, our whole goal was to look at how post-secondary plays the important role in making sure we get all of our citizens to that finish line. We set an attainment goal of 60%. That just didn't fall out of the air, 60% by 2030. What that is saying is that by 2030, we want all of our citizens in Kentucky to have a post-secondary credential that matters, not one that doesn't matter. So we count those. We look at quality when we talk about this quantity. And I'm proud to say, and I'll pull this up here in a second, I'll just pull it up now. As a matter of fact, this is where we're at. We're at 55% now toward that 60 by 30. In the last 5 years, we've made significant, way beyond statistical significant improvement. If you know anything about statistics at all, to move something 1 percentage point is a lot of percent. So to get 5 percentage points in the last 5 years, that means that we're doing something. And the point that I want to make here is that when we look at what we're doing, we don't all the time, this is not pointing fingers, we don't all the time get students to us that is well prepared as they should be academically, socially, emotionally, culturally. Our job on our campuses, as President Capilouto will talk about, is to make sure we set up an environment where they can achieve. We don't set up an environment where one group don't achieve while the other group achieves. It's about setting a goal and a high standard. And the best way to think about closing gaps fall in really 3 categories. And that's high excellence, high rigor, but also high input. So when we talk about equity, we're talking about inputs. We're talking about what it takes to get a student from where he or she's at to get them to the finish line. That may even be talking about unmet need. That may talk about what we do. I'm a rural Clay County Kentuckian whose father was illiterate. That means taking me, if I'm a low-income student, and helping me to have those things that it's going to take to get them to the finish line. College, whether we want to say this or not, historically hasn't been shaped for everybody in all situations. What we've done in Kentucky is to say, yes, it is. No matter if you're a flagship institution or a community college, we're saying that we will take you where we're at and we will give you, with our resources, what it takes to get you to that finish line. And we've set up policy, programs, processes to make sure we fill those potholes that has been obviously not filled. And I want you to also think about it in this context. If we don't do that, what are you left with? You don't want a bifurcated system where some people achieve and other people don't. That's not what it's set up to do. So ours is also not setting up a system to combat or actually to put people against each other. As a matter of fact, we look at this of diversity of thought, beliefs, understanding. It's not about forcing any ideology. It's about actually taking whatever ideology you got and building up, not taking that away, but helping you to have a post-secondary credential whereby you can go out and be the person you need to be in this economy, and also as a citizen. So that's why we're incorporating things like civic education and democracy in all of our programs. That's why we're incorporating problem solving, critical thinking, creative output. All of that has to be done in an environment of higher order thinking. So our goal is to create that paradigm, that process, that culture to do that. And I'm proud of where we've gone. So much so in the last 5 years, you know where we were at 5 years ago, many of you way behind. We're number 2 in the nation now in completions. We did this through multiple ways of thinking about it, what I call a triangulated way. We got a performance funding model that focuses on all of our students and the programs where we need to go and how we have to incorporate that in a manner that gets us there. That means that our institutions have changed behavior, a lot of behavior in the last 5 years to get us there, to focus on the state's needs. And let me be clear, I'm the president of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. That means I represent the state needs. That means that I'm colleagues with my good campus friends, but my job is to make sure the state needs where they want to go. That's big. And Rhode Island is the only state ahead of us. I won't mention Rhode Island, but the 3 people that are there were shipped in from somewhere. But, you know, the idea that we've got to increase our workforce participation rate. You know, the Chamber's data show that we've moved from 48 to 43. That's okay, but we've gone a long way, and we were a big movement in that process. And we also know that to do this, we're going to have to bring a lot of people to the table in a systematic way, whether it's P12 or whether it's the workforce. And we have shaped ourselves to do exactly that. But we can't do this if we look at the differentiated gaps that are happening in the students that we have. And I'm proud to say Kentucky, we're closing gaps faster or as fast than any other state in the nation. If you look here, and there's a lot of data here, but look at what we're doing here. KCTCS system and retention rates in the last 5 years, up 4.5 percentage points. Please understand, to move a percentage point is huge. That means you have to do a behavioral modification from where you're at as a base to do that. The underrepresented, 5.8%. So we're closing gaps in retention. So please also note, we're not bringing people down, we're taking everybody up. This is not a zero-sum game. And you can see the same with the low income. If you look at our 4-year public, 4.3 overall up. And if you look at, please understand, our 4-year institutions, now who would ever thought this, almost all of them except for one at an 80% retention rate. That's huge. That's come a long way. That means we had to do a lot of stuff to help that to happen. And we don't do it with just those that are already prepared for college. We had to do it with those at the level that they were, no matter where they were at in that process. Up URM 7 percentage points. And low income up 4.7. Mr. Chair, we've talked about this a lot, how we may have to tweak the performance funding model just a little bit to really increase some of that because we are a high poverty state. We're a low income. As a matter of fact, 17% of our people live in poverty, 25% of our young folks, 25% of our Latino population, 24% of our African American population. We got a long way to go, and post-secondary is a way to get there. Look at graduation rates, up. KCTCS 13.4 percentage points, last 5 years, folks. URM 12.1, KCTCS low income 14.2, 4-year public overall 7.5 percentage points. We used to talk about a 4-year degree being 6 years, remember that? We're now at a 4-year degree again. Think about that for a second. So our 4-year URM up 9.4 percentage points, one of the highest in the nation in increases. And our 4-year public low income, 6 percentage points. I want to see those go up. And I will ask this commission and others to help us to go up, not to do whatever it may take to actually stop the momentum. Our momentum is great. We do this without isolation. We do this without putting people in a corner. We do this as a community. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions or turn it over to my colleague to do his once I figure out how to make this work. Were there any questions before I reduce these?
Any questions so far? If not, we'll continue on, and certainly we can ask questions at the end. President Capilouto, if you'll make sure your microphone's turned on. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you kindly, and thank all the members of the committees, both the elected officials and our civic and citizen leaders, for making this a topic of public study, scrutiny, dialogue, and discussion. And I too want to thank Mr. Roberts. 13 years ago, when I was welcomed to the University of Kentucky, he was part of the board leadership that invited me for an opportunity of a lifetime, and I thank you for your service, sir. The University of Kentucky was created 160 years ago to advance our Commonwealth. It was a dream and a promise to help create and sustain a state that tomorrow will be healthier, wealthier, and wiser than it is today. That was our mission then. It is still our mission. And I would submit that we're doing more at any time in our history to make certain and make good on that mission, even as we recognize we have much, much more to do. It was on this day, approximately this day, we think, August 22nd, 1864, that Abraham Lincoln spoke to the 166th Ohio Regiment in Washington, D.C., about the course of the war and why they were fighting. It was, Lincoln told the assembled troops, so that, quote, each of you may have, through this free government which we have enjoyed, an open field and a fair chance for your industry, enterprise, and intelligence, that you may all have equal privileges in the race of life, with all its desirable human aspirations. He continued, the nation is worth fighting for, to secure such an inestimable jewel. So I think he summed it up best. It's an open field and a fair chance. That, too, is what we continue to fight for today as a university, whose mission is to advance this state in everything we do. To be sure, we have not met President Lincoln's goal, but that does not mean that we back away from it. We never will. We were founded in 1865. Belle Guin was the first female to graduate from our university in 1888. Lyman T. Johnson, native son of Louisville, forced open the doors to people of color in 1949. The first African American graduated in 1950, and the University of Kentucky was the first to integrate sports in the Southeastern Conference in 1967. And we have grown from small numbers, often facing long odds, to more than 5,000 students of color, some 16+% of today's current population at our university. So what are we doing today to honor Lincoln's call to ensure an open field and a fair chance for everyone? What progress have we made, and what more is there still to do? So my trusted colleague, thank you, Dr. Thompson, and thank you for your passionate opening remarks. So as you can see from this slide, starting in 2013, UK is helping fuel the state's growth in degrees and attainment. When I arrived 13 years ago, one of the things that attracted me most about Kentucky was its commitment to something simple but profound, that we would be stronger by degrees. And Dr. Thompson has elaborated on why an educated citizenry can make us a stronger Commonwealth. So we will have awarded, we anticipate, from our 2022-23 preliminary numbers, 9,500 degrees and certificates. That's up more than 11% from the previous year, and that's 3,200 more degrees and certificates than a decade ago. And as I mentioned, students of color represented more than 16% of the student body last year and nearly 18% of our first-year class. The first-year underrepresented minority number of nearly 1,100 students was almost a 22% increase over the previous year. We expect to enroll a record first-year class this year between 6,400 and 6,500 students, and we anticipate again to grow in ways that reflect the rich diversity of the state we serve. Now this slide shows the number of degrees and credentials awarded to underrepresented minorities, and you can see that most recently it's over 1,400 degrees, up 20% from the year before, and more than double the number from a decade ago. What is not shown here, if you look at the percentage of our total degrees that were awarded to underrepresented minorities. In 2013-14, it represents 9.4% of all the degrees we awarded. And for the next several years, I will share with you a continued ascent. It goes from 9.4 to 9.9 to 10.7 to 11.4 to 11.9 to 12.9 to 13.4 to 14.1. It dips slightly during COVID to 13.9, but our most recent number is 14.9% of all our graduates. I say that in gratitude to the faculty and staff that make that happen. Next slide, please. These numbers reflect an intentional strategy to educate and graduate more students at the University of Kentucky. Notice the continuous ascent here. We have raised 6-year graduation rates almost 11 percentage points, 5-year by 15 percentage points, and 4-year by 25 percentage points since fall 2006, that cohort. And this year we will report, most likely, a graduation rate of 70%. To put that in context, that will place us in the top 20%, according to our most recent data, among public universities that primarily grant bachelor's degrees. And so we did not do that by getting smaller or more elite. In fact, it was just the opposite. We are doing that by growing, enrolling more students overall, enrolling more Kentuckians, and enrolling a student body that reflects our state and world. More than a quarter of our undergraduate students are first-generation college students, and almost 80% of those are Kentuckians. So the next slide, Mr. President. We know students succeed for many reasons, and they also face barriers and challenges for several reasons. There are lots of variables, but perhaps the most powerful we have found through our research is the question of unmet financial need. Regardless of how prepared a student is or how well they do academically, we know that their retention rates decline precipitously when they have unmet financial need of $5,000 or more. And that unmet financial need is the difference between the total cost of attendance and the amount of grants, scholarships, and modest loans they have. If it gets greater than $5,000, no matter how academically prepared you are, we can have a 4.0 student, one that has greater than $5,000 in need and one that doesn't, and the success is much better for the one that has less than $5,000 in need. So this work that we did, and the data that I'll explain here in a moment, was the premise behind our UK LEADS program. It was one of the first efforts of its kind in the nation. We utilized the power of big data and predictive analytics to address the question of unmet financial need. And we target our grants and scholarships directly to eliminating that unmet need. And this slide unequivocally demonstrates the success of the program, which we started with institutional dollars, but people have recognized this is a good investment, and it's now attracting millions of dollars from the donors who we owe much thanks. So we started small. This is a cohort from 2016 to 2020. There were about 2,000 students. On the left is what our research has shown this category of students most likely would have achieved in terms of their first-year retention, some 65%. Through our analytics, we predicted if we provided this money, we would hopefully achieve for this group a retention rate of 75.7%. But in fact, every year we've looked at this, the final results show that the retention was even greater than we predicted or expected. In this case, 14% higher than would have been the case had these students not had this targeted need. So it's been enormously successful. We've been recognized across the country, and many universities are starting to mimic what we do. But it's part of a holistic approach. And just to give you an example of how we tackle this, every Friday, a group of about 80 university staff, faculty, and administrators gather for 2 hours to discuss the retention and success of our students on a group basis and on an individual basis. They take a deep dive into the data. They talk about approaches and interventions, what's working and what's not, and what needs to happen to support our students. We developed a conceptual framework for how we approach collective student success and individual student support. It has 4 pillars that we know work, and we put things within these pillars to attack the challenges our students face: finances, academic preparation, mental and physical well-being, and belonging. So we invested more and we integrated more fully our approaches to advising and counseling, and we closely track student involvement, using big data to help us support students and see what they may encounter in the face of their day-to-day activities. And sometimes we can predict in advance the challenges they're going to face before they even know it. So in addition to UK Leads and other financial aids, we are fully debuting this fall a new program. It too is the first of its kind. It's called UK Invest. So every student on our campus will have access to their own brokerage account that they can invest in, and that the university, using private philanthropy dollars, will invest in as well. We'll match the dollars as students engage in healthy behaviors and activities. So a few examples, those are employability and skill building activities, wellness, involvement in student activities, and financial literacy courses and activities. So we believe so strongly in the power of a UK degree that we want to invest in our students now, before a student graduates, because we know the return of that investment means so much for our state. Next slide. So finally and briefly, let me show you 2 slides that are not directly about student success, but speak to the importance of our collective efforts and our mission to advance Kentucky. We hope to announce in the coming weeks that our Markey Cancer Center has attained comprehensive center status from the National Cancer Institute, or NCI. We already are an NCI center, but comprehensive status is reserved for the very top cancer centers in the country. Some states have more than one, but there are only some 50 odd in the country. And it too was a dream of those who came before me. Hard work and investments that are paying off, all because we believe that no Kentuckian should have to leave home for the very best of care, no matter how complicated that care needed to be, or no matter how difficult and challenging that disease was. So it's going to create greater access for us to funding for research, to clinical trials, and the latest in novel therapeutics and other interventions. It means we will have the capacity to provide healing and hope to more people in a state more afflicted with the scourge of cancer than almost any other. You can see this concentration, especially in eastern Kentucky, and you can look across the country and see how it uniquely affects us. Among the many factors the National Cancer Institute examines when reviewing our cancer center, and I sat through the site visit just a few months ago, is the prevalence of disease and the clear connection there is with the burden of financial disadvantages. So underrepresented populations, by their definitions, certainly include race or identity, geography, income, and background. That's fundamental to every NIH grant that we submit. The National Science Foundation, which is at the center of the billions of dollars that are going to be in place for new grants and funding around areas like materials sciences and advanced manufacturing. And think of what we're doing in this state in terms of electric vehicle and battery production. They're adding these same considerations that we have to present in our proposals. So you know what else the NIH considers essential to its work? The diversity in the research teams and scientists who are doing this life-saving and transformative work. So according to their guidelines, NIH guidelines, this is what they state. Research shows that diverse teams working together and capitalizing on innovative ideas and distinct perspectives outperform homogeneous teams. Scientists and trainees from diverse backgrounds and life experiences bring different perspectives, creativity, and individual enterprise to address complex scientific problems. We are an increasingly diverse state in many of the ways that might be typically defined, but all along dimensions of race and diversity. But we are also a diverse state in so many other ways. Our beautiful and challenging geography, our unrelenting commitment to community and place, and the daunting challenges associated with financial disadvantages. Diverse problems require diverse people and diverse approaches to solve them. At the University of Kentucky, we understand and embrace this because we are committed like never before to the mission that defined our creation and still drives us today. And that is, we are here simply to advance Kentucky in everything we do. And that means, as President Lincoln so presciently said at the dawn of our founding, ensuring that everyone has an open field and a fair shot. So I look forward to the discussions and continued dialogue, and thank all of you for the support, and tip my hat to you because I like to say the achievements we have realized at the University of Kentucky is because of the power of we, and all of you in many ways have contributed to our successes, and I thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add one last thing as a summary, and then we'd be happy to take any questions. You know, you learn more from people different than you than from people like you. Our job is to set up that relationship and let it happen. Our job isn't to design a system that is negative toward any group or make them feel as if they don't want to listen. So the way I have operationalized DEI and higher education is simply this. I'll give an analogy and happy to go in greater detail, but I'll do it quickly. Diversity is the difference among population groups, the way they look, the way they act, the way they think, all of those. That's diversity. It's an aspect of a population group, right? And inclusion is, I'll give an analogy of a dance. In higher education in Kentucky, we've invited everybody to the dance. We have. As a matter of fact, we've set up our minimum admissions policy to invite everybody to the dance. Inclusion is that we ask them to dance. President Capilouto just gave you some examples about how we've asked everybody to dance. We're not just wanting to ask a few people to dance because they're great dancers. We're asking everybody to dance. But what we've recognized, an example is the unmet need, and I'll give you an example. I know President Capilouto is a better dancer than I am. I've seen him. But I will tell you that equity then is about giving me dance lessons. Give me what I need in order to be included to participate. It is not giving me an opportunity that I don't deserve. It's not giving me something because purely of the color of my skin. It's not actually setting anything up. So equity is the process of infusing what's needed at that time for that student, no matter what kind of diversity they're bringing to the table, in order to get them to the finish line where they can participate at an equitable level within our society. That's the way we've operationalized everything that we do. It's that simple. And it's not just about race and ethnicity. It's about the full elements by which, and you've seen the examples by which we do. So, Mr. Chair, we will be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Gentlemen, well presented. Thank you both. President Capilouto, especially thank you for your passion, your commitment, and for your effort in moving us toward that target of 60 by 30. The role the University of Kentucky has played needs to be spoken to because it is so powerful for us to achieve that goal of 60 by 30, and we could not do it without our flagship institution leading the way. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
If you'll slide back a few slides, I'm going to take the chairman's prerogative to address a question or two that came to my mind. That freshman cohort graduation rate slide is a very powerful slide. When
Is
you
this
look,
the one?
Keep going back.
go back that one.
Okay.
Fall of 2006, 31% graduation rate. We moved to fall of 2018, 55.5%, 55.4% graduation rate. Those are lives that are changed forever. And President Thompson, you spoke to it in your opening remarks about the role of education in that space. But I want to make sure everyone picked up on some words that you used, President Capilouto, that I jotted down. Of that 55.4%, you indicated 25% are first generation and 80% are Kentucky students. So speak to that for just a moment, if you would.
Yeah, let me elaborate even further. Of our Kentucky students, year after year, I said we didn't become more selective or more elite. We kept our doors open wide. 25% of all our Kentuckians come from families whose average annual income is about $25,000. So we will have disserved Kentucky if we do not work tirelessly to make certain those students, most of whom are first generation students, don't realize the transformative power of a degree. At graduation every year, one of the more moving parts to me, the entire floor of Rupp Arena is filled with students. We have 4 ceremonies in May, a couple in December. And I ask, if you're the first in your family to graduate from college, please rise. And I will share that I almost choke up every time I look out there. And then to learn of those in the audience who then send me an email and tell me, I was the first in my family and what it's meant to me. So we're deeply committed to this. And I can't thank enough all our faculty, staff, and students, because it takes keen minds, caring hearts, and a lot of helping hands to move numbers like this. No one department can do it, no one person, no one intervention.
Well said. Representative Kulkarni, you're recognized for the first question, and I have Representative Brown on deck.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for presenting. Is it okay if I ask 2 questions?
Certainly.
All right. The first one had to do with the first couple of slides where you're talking about the overall degrees and credentials awarded, and that includes the URM, which remind me again what that stands for.
So underrepresented minorities, the definition, the state one that we're provided by CP and others includes American Indian or Alaskan Native, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, or 2 or more races.
Thank you. So out of all of those, like those 2 slides, have you seen any trends or patterns in the areas of study or the fields in which these degrees are awarded?
So I don't have exact data with me, but I know that the chairman had a strong hand in developing our performance funding model. And of those 11 metrics, it certainly focuses on the number of degrees and number of degrees awarded to underrepresented minorities, but it also includes as a metric the degrees awarded in the STEM plus health fields. And I don't have those numbers with me, but those have moved dramatically too. I can get those numbers.
And I can tell you they have. There's been the influx of many more of those citizens, which in the past have been in dearth, even in getting in the pipelines in those, right? Where we are seeing a lot more of those students receiving STEM-H degrees. So that has been, but this is very purposeful, very strategic. Mr. Chair can tell you, our performance funding, we looked at the dearth in those areas that we had to do that. The other item I will throw in, Kentucky during COVID, you know, we had an enrollment dip. Everybody in the country did. But the only group that was up was underrepresented. Only group that was up then. And now, I just got through giving a speech on it 2 weeks ago at a national level. Kentucky was the first state, or one of the first states, to actually rebound from enrollment. You're going to hear some good news coming from us again in all of our areas. We're up significantly. These were all done purposefully through good strategies, healthy strategies. But the one thing it tells me is our underrepresented populations start believing in what we were telling them, because we start showing it up to do it. It was not any extra stuff we were offering, but we gave them everybody extra stuff once they got there. So you will see an increase, and we can give you all those numbers if you like.
Yeah, just out of curiosity. And my second question has to do with this slide. Does it also include international students?
It includes all undergraduate students.
Okay.
So it would.
So
And
I
that's
will,
a small fraction of our undergraduate population. Our international students are more populous in our graduate programs.
okay. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thank you. Representative Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Dr. Capilito and
Good afternoon.
Dr. Thompson. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question deals with diversity, equity, and inclusion, the initiatives that we have set forth with the University of Kentucky and subsequently with the Commonwealth of Kentucky to make lives better and to level the playing field for people that are looking to participate. My question is the affirmative action ruling by the Supreme Court. How do you see that affecting our DEI efforts?
Sure. Thank you, Representative Brown. First of all, we have a responsibility to comply with the law, and we will. We've had teams working over the summer to see that we certainly do, but at the same time, we want that community of belonging where everyone, regardless of their background, identity, color, faith, whatever, feels welcomed at the University of Kentucky. So we had at the University of Kentucky only one race-specific scholarship. We're adjusting that to have a more holistic approach and comply fully with the Supreme Court ruling. But our goal is to continue the advances we've made across all who are represented on our campus.
If I may, Mr.
To
Chairman.
speak to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, I mean, we anticipated this, right? And a while back in 2016, when we built our policy, we built it on a holistic process. So it hasn't affected us very much at all. And we don't know everything yet. We're looking microscopically at everything, but we will comply with the law. The item that I worry about, though, I'm going to go one step farther. The item that I worry about, we'll have students in the state that will perceive that they're not possibly welcome. So I think it's going to be on us to make sure that students know that we're still a campus that they can come to and be a part of. So our efforts on campuses surround everything from adult learners to low income to a variety of folks that may need that extra input to get where they want to go. All of those are DEI efforts to us in that regard. So that the piece that is important to understand is that if we're setting up, whether it's misrepresentation, misnomers, or people don't know the truth, it's our job to make sure that they have the truth and have the understanding that we're still open to everybody and we're going to give them what they need to be successful. We will not target in a negative way anyway. We'll target all those students that need our help, no matter where they're coming from, first generation or not, to get where they need to go.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Dr. Capilouto, your reference to the students that stood up when you asked about first generation or first time college graduates, I'm thinking more in terms of what the opportunities will be for those first time college graduates to step out into the workforce and to create generational wealth and for themselves and their families in future generations. Can you speak to that?
Yes, sir. And when I mentioned a program like UK Invest, it is experiential learning on steroids. We partner with Fidelity. 33,000 students will have their brokerage account. If they want to withdraw their money that they invest in it, they can have it all in 24 hours. But we want them to know early on, and while they're a student, that managing their finances and investing wisely can prepare them for a life of meaning and purpose. Among the things that we will contribute in terms of your activities, on the financial literacy side, it's creating a budget, banking outside of just checking and savings, and spend, save, and invest courses. In terms of our skill building, supplemental instruction, integrated success coaching, which involves career planning and so forth, and heavy tutoring. So, with all those activities, you learn a lot in the classroom. Some prepare you for a career. But we're looking at this in a way to have a sort of micro interventions, but a macro effect on having our students ready, career ready, and contributors to Kentucky's workforce.
And I want to add one other thing we're doing in the state. We're having what's called a graduate profile. We have 10 essential skills that employers have identified that they wanted. So a part of those we're going to incorporate into as many majors as we can and all general education around those competencies, such as a capstone. We want advisory groups, employer advisory groups at all of our in all of our majors, not just those that have historically been in business and engineering and some other areas. We also know that the best way for us to define quality in higher education, in many ways, at least to start, is if that employer recognizes they want our students. And by the way, in those essential skills, all employers are telling us they want people to be able to work with people of diverse backgrounds. They don't want someone who's monolithic that don't know how to do that and be able to communicate across borders, as an example. But a part of that is to have those advisory groups, and by 2030, I'd like to see every college student, people tell me it's an ambitious goal, but I'm okay with that, is to have every college student with a work-based learning. So if you want to get them employed at the levels they need to be employed, we need to get employers engaged with us earlier on the front end to make that happen. That's how you get to the process of having the income in order to build wealth, in my opinion, and know how to build wealth. And I applaud UK for actually going way one step farther and actually putting some of their philanthropy dollars in creating that pipeline for that wealthy, hopefully that wealthy student.
Just one more follow-up, Mr. Chairman. And we're talking about students, and I understand that, and I think that's very important. The University of Kentucky is in the business of educating our young people. I'm also concerned with teaching and educating our young people. I'm very concerned with opportunities for doing business with the University of Kentucky, and that DEI effort of increasing the amount of spend with diverse vendors across the Commonwealth. And diversity, equity, inclusion has posed an opening for a lot of people and or for a lot of companies. We're not there yet in terms of the 10% goal that we have. I would hope that we would meet and exceed that 10% goal, and be some of the $5 billion approximately of goods and services and construction, new and renovated construction that we have going at the university. That $500 million would make a great difference in the diverse community across our state. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Representative Brown, for that question. A few years ago, we hired what we think is just superb leadership in that area so that we can expand the opportunities for those who want to compete for what we procure under state regulations. I don't have the data with me, but I think we've enjoyed wonderful progress. We've made it easier for people to select diverse vendors. You know, a campus like ours, with now a $7 billion budget, has lots of people that are making choices about what we purchase and all. So we have even gone into improved our technology such that when there are opportunities to choose among diverse contractors and so forth, it's easier to connect, and it's easier now for those who are interested in doing business with the university to understand how our procurement systems and other contract awarding works.
In closing, Mr. Chair, thank you, Dr. Capilouto, and thank you, Dr. Thompson. And I'd like to also send out my thanks to purchasing at the University of Kentucky in the Central Campus and at the UK Med Center. And hopefully that we will do better in changing lives and changing strategic sight for people in the Commonwealth of Kentucky to do business with the University of Kentucky and provide generational wealth for themselves and for their families. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Berg, you have a question.
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I guess it is a question. Would either of you feel comfortable addressing shortly for me what we're seeing happening, God willing, not in this state, but in other states across this country, where we have legislators that are actually filing bills that make offices of diversity, equity, and inclusion illegal in our colleges? This is something that I've watched and read about going on across the country now, and my understanding is there's been up to 50 bills at this point. Is this something that you think would hurt us in this state if we were to follow? And if so, how?
I'll let Dr. Capilouto have the final statement. I'll say this. I think it's important, if we don't have those conversations first, about what the issues are. What I think is happening in many other states, and I think we have a different philosophy in this state in our conversations with the legislature, but I think I've seen people actually make laws against stuff that wasn't happening, really. So I want to know what the conversation is. What are the issues? And if we can fix it, we want to fix it if they are real issues, right? What I don't want to do is, I know the story behind throwing out the baby with the bathwater for an old country boy who was the youngest of 9 children, what it means. But what we don't want to do is ruin our momentum because someone has a different philosophy about what we're doing when what they think we're doing, we're not doing. So for me, it's going to be more important that we have these real conversations up front. And I think this is the place to go. But anytime, I think, if you make legislation, or even if we do things we shouldn't do without the full body of knowledge about the reasons why and the necessity of those, then I think we would be falling short of the kind of dialogues, at least we feel in higher education, we need to have with your body. So that's not skipping around that. I'm just saying that if we have something in place, we know why we have it in place. And if it shouldn't be there, we should assess it, no doubt. But I would hope that conversation takes place before any bill is passed.
I would add this. Hopefully made the point that the definition of diversity is quite broad for us at the University of Kentucky. Our efforts are going to continue. To give you an example of how we respect and must respect a broad definition, this is part of the National Institutes of Health definition of diversity. that we must demonstrate a commitment to every time we submit a grant. So these are for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds, defined as those who meet 2 or more of the following criteria. Here are just some of them. Currently are in a foster care system. We know that in Kentucky. Eligible for federal free or reduced lunch program for 2 or more years. Have or had no parents or legal guardians who completed a bachelor's degree. Were or currently eligible for federal Pell Grants. So we are here for everybody in Kentucky. Everybody has had a different lived experience or a walk of life. I go back to what President Lincoln said. We're looking to give everybody a fair shot on a sort of equal playing field so that everyone enjoys privileges. We think that that can lift our state. So that's that community of belonging we want to create.
Gentlemen, well said. Thank you both. Before I let you leave, I need you to do one more opportunity to do a quick but brief shout out to all of us, because you've got a room full of ambassadors here. The two of you are leaders on your campus. You're leaders in a formal sense. You're also thought leaders. And we've had some conversations about a looming demographic crisis coming as it portends the college-going rate. That period of births in 2008, 2009, and the decline that's coming, for us to hit that goal of 60 by 30, we're going to need everybody in this room on board spreading the news about the benefits of going to college. So take 30 seconds, 45 seconds, or a minute. Do that push. You're singing to the choir, but this choir is going to leave this room and hopefully sing outside the door. Sing to the choir for just a moment.
I'll let you go first, sir.
I said we're here so that tomorrow Kentucky will be healthier, wealthier, and wiser today. I think you can look at study after study that education comes first if you want to have that kind of Kentucky. So we are here to keep our doors open wide. We have students who come from a variety of economic advantages or disadvantages. Their preparation for college may differ. But at the University of Kentucky, you're going to be welcome, embraced, supported, and our goal is to get more and more students across that stage receiving a degree.
Falls in, I'll make this quick because I could speak for an hour on this. The 4 items, when we look statistically at getting to 60 by 30, there's 4 big items we're going to have to consider. One is, how do we get the college going rate up? We're at 47.8% of every student graduating from a Kentucky high school going to a college in Kentucky. 5 percentage points go to out of state. Now those 40, but not all of those have jobs, by the way, which is a misnomer. I'll let you look in your community. I bet you know a lot of folks. So there's a lot of folk that are not counted in the workforce participation rate. So my hope is that y'all will help us in that area to do 2 things. And that, by the way, high school seniors are going down too. So not only are we losing the demographic, we're losing the demographic, those that are there to come to college. How do we get that up? How do we get them better prepared? Let me be honest with you. 3 out of 5 of every college student that's on his campus and other campuses have a mental or behavioral health issue. They are academically, we keep talking about, that's the truth, folks. There's a whole lot of things that we're going to have to do. We have to look at higher education so differently now than we did 5 years ago, but much less 10 years ago. So that means that we're going to have to concentrate on that one big element. How do we increase that? Number 2, how do we increase our student success? These numbers are great. We can't leave anybody behind in this because if you look at we still have a lot of gaps coming out of K-12 as an example. So how do we actually give the inputs that are needed to make sure they get to the finish line? I appreciate he didn't tell you his graduation rate overall now, but it's high. And it's going to keep going higher. But we've got some elasticity there. We're going to have to increase student success, number 2. Number 3, we're going to have to get more out-of-state students to come here and stay in state. So what are strategies around that to get to 60 by 30? Number 4, which is another DEI issue, a big DEI issue, getting more of our adult learners back into the workforce. Right now we have 600,000 what I call low-hanging fruit. There's a lot more than that, but those are people that we can get back engaged in a certificate or a degree that matters. Employers are going to have to be there with us. The chamber and other folks are. So we have to work with that. And the best way we know how to do this, and I'm asking you all, mentoring increases the chance for a young person to be successful by 22% at the minimum. So I would ask that you don't, if we're having any policies, if we're having any sort of, if you're in business or an industry, if we're not actually reaching out to perform these sorts of duties to help these students get to the end, then we want to. We're announcing all kinds of partnerships now more than ever. If you're in that position, let's partner. If you're in the legislature, I'm going to ask you to think about how do you help us and not do things to hurt, right? But how do you help us to get where we need to go?
Gentlemen, well said. Thank you both so much for your presentation. Truly,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
Our next presenter on the agenda, we're honored to have the Kentucky Chamber Foundation's Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion come to the table. President Watts, we're honored to have you join us here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try to get this PowerPoint. I think I have a PowerPoint here somewhere.
President Daniels, you never seem to age, sir.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Thank you, I appreciate it.
We're honored to have you joining us again as well. Please do, both of you, state your names for the record, and you're welcome to start your presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Ashley Watts. I'm President and CEO of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce.
Afternoon, Ray Daniels, owner of Equity Solutions Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for having us. We are excited to be here today. I think this is the third year that we have testified before this commission on this important work, and I'm excited to announce that we've made a lot of progress in the last 3 years. Most of you all are familiar with the Chamber of Commerce and the work that we do over here at the Capitol with advocacy, but we have a really robust Kentucky Chamber Foundation that is the programmatic and philanthropic arm of the Kentucky Chamber, and that's where our Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion lies, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Much like of our work with policy and in the advocacy arena centers around workforce, so does that happen in our foundation as well. And so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about some programs that we have in our Center for DE&I that really are centered on economic prosperity and workforce. We have been here, like I said, for 3 years. The first year, I think Ray and I came and kind of talked about this idea we had from the Kentucky Chamber's perspective about how we could really listen and learn and pull up a seat at the table in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion, and make sure that the business community was doing our part to make a more equitable Kentucky. And the first step that we did was we published a report. Like many times with the Chamber, we do everything according to the data, and we look at research and make sure that we have sound recommendations. Last year, we kind of talked about how our work was gearing up and what programs we were hoping to achieve and the work we were hoping to do. And this year, I'm really excited to talk about the work that we have done. And so a lot of progress has been made in the last couple of years. I put this picture up on the screen because I really think this is an exciting picture to show. Many of you are familiar with the Chamber. We are the largest business association in the state with thousands of members from all across Kentucky in every single sector. And a couple of years ago, we asked for members of the Kentucky Chamber to be part of our task force for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I often don't tell my husband or kids this, but I don't know everything. And most of us do not. And especially in the world of DE&I knew I needed to listen. I knew I needed to learn from those that were in the world to really make sure that the data that we had seen from our report that was pretty shocking, how could we help to improve those issues? And so we gathered a small group of people 3 years ago. It was probably about 10 of us that would get together on a regular basis, and we formed this report. And we knew from the Chamber's perspective that we wanted to kind of stay within our scope. We knew that we needed to take a bite of this apple. We couldn't eat the whole apple at a time. And so our report really focused on the 3 issues that our group said, this is the Chamber sphere. This is where you guys have influence. And that was education, criminal justice reform, and economic opportunity. And that's really where our work with diversity, equity, and inclusion has really focused on. I'm proud to say today, about 3 years later, that we have about 40 people on our task force, and it grows every day. We have about 4 meetings a year, but this group of business leaders and community leaders from all across Kentucky are really our guiding light. They are our sounding board. And Ray, we are honored that he is our chair as well as on the Kentucky Chamber Board to really lead this work. But everything that we do is membership driven from the Chamber, and all of our work with DE&I really comes from this group and from their expertise and their learned experiences. So, here we go. So the next slide is something I'm excited to talk about. This is the actual work we've been doing. So the last couple of years, we've kind of talked about our report and the data that we found and some of the policy recommendations we were looking at. But today we're going to talk about the programmatic work of our foundation. And back in April of this year, the Center for DE&I, we hosted our first DE&I Academy, which was a 3-day educational and interactive experiences for business executives, HR leaders, and DE&I professionals to raise awareness and provide actionable steps to embed DE&I in their respective organizations and business. The participants represented a wide range of organizations, and we put a lot of their logos up on the screen. And this was really kind of what I said was our beta test. We formed this with the task force. We asked them what we should cover, how we should train these businesses. And this group of businesses and nonprofits here up on the screen were really kind of our test subjects. We wanted them to pick our academy apart. All of them thought it was a great academy and that it was really something that business leaders and community leaders alike should participate in. And so this academy model will go forward in our work through the foundation. Another event I'm excited to talk about was that we have hosted 2 Shop Conscious events here in Kentucky, really focusing on minority-owned business certification. So these events happened this summer in Lexington and in Louisville, where over 100 businesses learned about the benefits of becoming and working with certified minority-owned businesses, as well as the process to become certified. And so that's just a couple of pictures there. And this is something that has been so successful. We're going to replicate it, obviously, in the future. This is a picture of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit. So I know almost all of you all have all attended chamber events, and we like to have events at the chamber to make sure that we are bringing together business leaders, community leaders, policymakers to really learn and discuss and talk about important and pressing issues. And diversity, equity, and inclusion was absolutely one of those. And I know Terrence Gibbons, Senator Neal, Representative Heverin all participated in this summit last year that had over 400 participants in a day-long seminar in Louisville. We are going to have our second summit on October 10th in Louisville, and I know that Representative Timoney and Representative Kulkarni are going to join us for that as well. And this is a great time for business leaders from all over Kentucky to really gather together, hear from experts, listen and learn. We've had great attendance, and we expect about 500 people at that conference in October. And then lastly, I know Representative Brown asked a little bit about the supplier network and vendors and the University of Kentucky. This is probably the thing that we're most proud of that has come out of our center and kind of the action items that I've talked about today. And this is our Kentucky Minority-Owned Business Database. So when we started this work several years ago, I would get calls from businesses, from universities and others across the state on a weekly basis saying, we're doing an RFP, we want to put this out for minority businesses. Isn't there a website? Is there a website I can just go to and see, what vendors are minority owned? And much to my naivete, I thought that there probably was. So I started calling the Cabinet for Economic Development. I called the Secretary of State's office. I called local chambers of commerce would have it for their area. But there was no statewide database of where anyone that is minority certified business owned could go and put their information on a database. And so we said, this is obviously a problem, a very tangible thing that we can do from the Kentucky Chamber's perspective that is going to help not only Kentucky businesses that are looking to diversify their supply chain, but also from those smaller businesses that are minority owned that really kind of wanted to make sure they were getting in front of as many businesses as they could. And so over a period of several months, we have created this database. We think that it's the first ever in the nation to do something like this. There is still room to grow, as any database is. Things change by the minute in terms of technology. And so we are constantly updating this database, but we're really proud that when we get those calls, or as you as legislators get those calls to say, hey, we have this RFP, we have this project, we want to make sure that we're looking at minority-owned businesses to send this to, we have a one-stop shop that they can go to. So I'm very proud of that, and that is at MBDKY, Minority Business Database Kentucky.com, and we'll be happy to send that around as well. And so I just really wanted to quickly show you some of the work we have done. A lot of times we come here and we talk about policy and we talk about big ideas, and obviously the chamber is very active in the legislative side of things and on the policy side. But there is a lot to be done in this world programmatically, and I think that's where our foundation has really kind of found its niche, that there has been a need throughout Kentucky and specifically with Kentucky businesses, and we've been able to meet some of those needs. We know we have a long way to go. We have just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg on this, and we're committed to continuing to do this work moving forward. But today, when preparing this presentation, I was really excited to think about the last 3 years that Ray and I have come to do this and how far we've come. And 3 years ago, this started with an idea. We knew we needed to do more. We didn't know exactly what that looked like. And here we are 3 years later with very tangible action items showing how we are helping our minority-owned businesses and making it to where we have a more equitable Kentucky. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ray Daniels, to talk about his work with this.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Ashley. I want to thank you guys, of course, for your commitment and walking along with us for the last 3 years, Chair Givens and the committee. So achieving equity to build a stronger Kentucky. I guess I want to come at some of the questions around DEI that Mr. Brown has raised. Really good questions. Why was all of this? Why was economics put in with health and education, right? Why would we put that disparity among all the other disparities? And the reason is, if you can impact the community economically, you have a really good chance of impacting some of the other disparities. And so that's the reason why we talk so much about it. If you looked at the wage differences and the opportunity differences for minority, female, veteran-owned businesses across, and kind of a new group of immigrant businesses across the Commonwealth, there are opportunities for us to do what we initially said we want to do with this group, and that is to really look at workforce and look at how retaining talent, retraining talent, educating talent, and exposing talent that we're not currently using at a high level to opportunities would create a better workforce for Kentucky. And that's essentially what we're trying to do, boots on the ground, is that we're trying to create and work on these strategies around how do we do that, right? So a lot of incubators, a lot of accelerators have popped up, and you guys may be familiar with some that have. The ones that are having success, and I'm affiliated with a couple that are having some success, really focus on the education, the training, and the exposure part. So Dr. Capilouto was up here talking about the University of Kentucky. One of the things that they're doing really well is they're doing a really good job of educating minority companies, immigrant companies, female companies, and veteran-owned companies. How do you do business with University of Kentucky? Because that's where it starts. And then they're doing a really good job of using companies like myself to train those companies on the gaps that they have inherently. So I'll give you a couple of examples. In one of the accelerators we had a company that was a very good farm-to-table company, doing very well, but had not been able to access or receive a significant grant that would push them to where they could purchase or buy or rent their own building and grow their business. And I had not been able to really get into a position where they could do business with the major public spend partners, because that is where your large spend is. The budgets that you have in Lexington, for example, is $7 billion with the University of Kentucky. The school district announced a $1 billion, I can't get my mind around that, Representative Timony, $1 billion budget, pretty incredible. And that's why we focus on some of those spend partners. And what we learned through the classes, every 2 weeks, classes centered around human resources, accounting, mental health, business acumen, all of those things, is that minority companies were losing a lot of inertia or a lot of movement in their strategies and inefficiencies. And once you fix some of the inefficiencies in the strategies, you're able to help them propel themselves. So we had companies, in other words, that were growing in size, but still not having accounting to match their growth, or still didn't have HR services to match their growth. Once we put all that together for this one company in particular, and she invested in her accounting software, an accounting company, and invested in a company to manage her HR needs, she was able to get a federal grant. She was able to actually take the time that she was spending to do her own accounting and her own HR services and commit that time into growing her business and her company. And she was able to do the relationship stuff. So the Kentucky Chamber can have a lot of great events. If you don't have time to go to the events and network and meet people, then you are going to have a hard time growing your business, because it starts first with relationships. So out of the accelerators, we have one of the accelerators we run for Commerce Lexington has grown now of a group of 6 companies is now over 20 million in revenue. And that was a start of 8 million in revenue 4 years ago. And then we have 10 other companies that are in an accelerator that we actually lessened the amount of their revenues to get in the accelerator. We lowered it from 250,000 revenue to 100,000. We're working with those 10 companies, and we've included immigrant companies inside of those companies, understanding that immigrant companies are the highest growth of new entrepreneurs in Lexington. And so once you understand how you can provide the services, then you can actually really work on the development of the company that will lead to retaining and keeping them here. Here's what we do know with all the quantitative data you have around minority companies. They spend local. They spend all of their money in their community. They hire people from the community, and they pay their taxes in the community as well. They're the greatest resource of entrepreneurs that you can have. So the other thing that we've had to do is make sure that they're competitive. And once again, you've got to work on all the other things to make sure that they're competitive, because companies ultimately won't do business with you if you're going to cost more. So one of the things that you have to do is work on the efficiencies to make sure that they are competitive as well. So last time we got together, we talked about what's the roadmap to getting there. We've got to be able to track and measure how many companies. Are we growing companies? Are we retaining companies? We've got to give these companies access to grants and other financial opportunities. You've got to be able to report out ultimately on that success or lack thereof success to help your movement. And then you've got to address any barriers that may be in the way, because as Dr. Capilouto said, we want to have an open field mentality. And that's currently what we have. So that's just a few of the things that we're doing in and around Central Kentucky. We're having some success with some of the accelerators. We're seeing as Kentucky Chamber has seen companies join their database, we're seeing more companies join Commerce Lexington. More companies come to more events. We have, to your question, Representative Brown on University of Kentucky has created a minority procurement platform of their own, where they're not only creating tier 1 but tier 2 spend. They've added 25 vendors to that list of companies that have goods and services, so folks can access that platform with the other purchasing platforms that they have on campus. So now when you go on in a purchase at the University of Kentucky, you have the ability to look at all of the companies that want to be competitive to sell their goods and services on campus. So that group of 25 companies actually will grow over the next year or so.
Thank you both for the presentation. We appreciate the Chamber and the leadership the Chamber always provides in engaging in these conversations, creating opportunities for us to explore new ways and cultivate new talent. My question, I'm going to take the chairman's prerogative, though. I'm going to direct it to you, President Daniels. We've had these conversations for a couple of years now, and you've been in this space working productively 4 or 5 years, ballpark?
Yes, sir.
You've brought to us, and I love the success stories. Congratulations to you. It's a reflection on your skill sets and talents to cultivate people around you to believe in the cause and to move it forward. Share some disappointments. In the 3 to 5 years you've been doing this, there's been some along the way, so share some of those with us as well.
Yeah, so the major disappointments would be that, surprisingly, we don't have any major disappointments. And I think that's a credit to the companies being able to rebound. We don't put all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. But disappointments would be when companies ultimately make the decision to leave the state because they think there's just not going to be enough opportunity to sustain their growth. That has been, few and far between. Here of late, we have seen most of the companies hiring more people. We've seen companies growing out of their office space into larger office space, creating more storage space, partnering with other companies. Recently in Lexington, we had some townhomes that were built, 12 townhomes that were built. and it was built from a general contractor that was in one of the accelerators, and all of the subcontractors were in subsequent accelerators. So the business was all companies that had been operating in and around some of the accelerators that operate in Lexington, Kentucky. So we've seen a lot of success like that of late, a lot of first time. We've seen a company that was the first minority company to get a significant contract with Fayette County Schools that had a student that actually went to Fayette County Schools. That's Elaine Allen with Bishop Carter. So we've had some good successes. It's really accentuating what the Kentucky Chamber does well. We're just advocating on behalf of a lot of companies. We've had a lot of folks like yourselves that are here and committed and understand the whole workforce. The workforce part of it. I mentioned Bishop Carter and Elaine Allen. That's another company that could, if he wanted to, be very prosperous by leaving the state. He could go to Indiana and Kentucky and in Ohio and do fairly well. He has done really well in Kentucky and is actually committed to growing his business in Kentucky. So it's really the exposures, the ability to, Representative Brown brought a really good question up earlier when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. And it's not about giving someone more of something. It's just really giving them the open field to have the opportunity to present themselves in their companies. And then organizations like myself and the Kentucky Chamber have to come along and have to give them the other tools and resources they need to develop their company. And that's the extra, is you have to have the tools and resources to be competitive, because ultimately you still have to get your price in a competitive place, whether you're selling goods or services.
So we've had lots of conversation over the course of the last year, 18 months, about workforce participation, concerns about that limiting resource, especially for our larger manufacturing firms and for businesses that are seeking to employ lots and lots of individuals. Are we seeing an impact on entrepreneurs as they get to this place of hey, I'm ready to launch, I'm really ready to grow this thing exponentially, but suddenly I don't have access to the workforce I need? Is it impacting there, or is it something we shouldn't be quite as concerned about?
No, it's always concerning. I mean, a workforce is an issue for any business at this current time, especially if you're in a growth mode. It's very concerning. So we try to accentuate the positive and say, let's work on retention, so you're not losing as many people. Let's work on your turnover, because people are a critical need of any organization or company.
So we typically don't enjoy political questions, but I'm going to throw one on to the two of you before you throw it on to me.
That's a politician right there. I will turn my mic off.
Coming out of COVID, lots of conversations I've had with colleagues in my business and industry, which is agriculture, along with other business and industry groups. Something changed in COVID. The mindset of people as it relates to work and going to work and the role of work in their lives. Speak to that. Are you sensing any of that in the work the Chamber does and the work that you do about people maybe having a little different life plan as a result of COVID? And how do we pivot our business and industries to acknowledge that the world is changing, and definitely the generation behind us has a different view of what the world of work looks like? My children have a different view than what I had. I'm not saying it's the wrong view, but it's a different view. There are some political minefields in there if you step on the wrong one, though.
We could probably talk about this all day. I often say after COVID, we went from talking about work-life balance to work-life integration. And right now, everything is kind of muddled up. We don't really work the kind of 8 to 4:30 hours anymore. You can maybe be a little bit more flexible, but maybe you work at night because of these. A lot of us work probably a lot more. And so it's just kind of, there's not as much separation. And I think that's very much kind of what has happened post-COVID. People want more flexibility. And also, I think, especially for the younger generation, they definitely want that flexibility. They want to be able to work maybe from home a couple days a week. And it has changed. The way that we have been working has changed. Looking at workforce participation and kind of people's motives to work, during COVID, we fell to about, I think, 48th in workforce participation, which Dr. Thompson talked about earlier. We're now at 43rd with about 56% of our working age population working. So we dipped, we've come back up a little bit, but we're still in the bottom 10 here in Kentucky in terms of people that are in that working age population that can work, that are working. And so we still face those workforce issues. Often say, I think when you look at employers right now, especially post-COVID, you look at the creativity they've had, kind of what Ray was saying, to retain their current workforce and also to attract their current workforce. And I always think it's interesting when I talk to members of the chamber, a couple years ago, one of the big things that companies were doing was offering tuition assistance. A lot of companies did that. Now it's childcare assistance. Some are even offering pet insurance. They're offering all of these kind of a myriad of programs and benefits that were very different than from a couple years ago, because they want to make sure that they are retaining and attracting that younger generation of workers. And so, I can speak as an employer. We have 60 employees at the Chamber of Commerce, and many of them are younger than I am. They have great work ethic. They just work a little differently than we used to, from 8:30 to 5, and you kind of checked out, and then you showed back up the next morning. It's all kind of mushed together now in this work-life integration. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just something that we as employers have really had to figure out, and make sure that, we can still have the productivity that we have, and their priorities are different. I think you see one thing we look at often is, I know probably the generation before me stayed at jobs for 20 and 30 years. You had a good paying job, you stayed there for 30 years, you retired, and that was that. I've had a couple jobs in my career. I think even this next generation probably has even less. They say, 3 or 4 years and go to the next thing. There's not quite that sense of loyalty to potentially an employer like we used to see. So this could probably be like a thesis for someone's graduate degree, but it is very much a generational thing, and I think it was probably going to happen eventually, and COVID just sped everything up to where we went from working in the office to working at home, and now I think many of us are trying to kind of meet in the middle somehow, but retain that talented workforce that we have and attract, the next generation. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
I think the retention and talent part of it is, Dr. Thompson spoke to it very eloquently. They are telling their story so well that some of those embedded in some of those college, rates are the fact that you have a segment of kids that are going and seeking dual credits. They're getting apprenticeships. They're doing internships at a young age, and they're going into college as sophomores or, second semester freshmen at the very least. They usually have 10 to 12 to 15 credit hours. So that's a commitment to work. But that's an exposure. They're being exposed, and so I commend all of the colleges that are taking more Kentucky students, because that's always not the most revenue decision to take Kentucky students. But when you take more Kentucky students, what you're doing is giving those kids the huge exposures, and most of those kids are taking advantage of it. They are going to school already in a work mindset. Now, they may be a different mindset about hours and all of those things, but they at least have had enough exposures to go seek and get dual credits and apprenticeships in various fields.
Well said. Thank you both. Any members of the commission have a question or a thought before we conclude? Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, too, for your presentation today. And Dr. Thompson, Dr. Capoletto, thank you for your presentation also. I think it's really important, DE&I is one of those lightning rod topics. It is. We're just going to statement of fact. It's one of those lightning rod topics. I really appreciate the time that you all brought today to talk about and to give data, to give articulate, concise things as exactly what the reasoning and what the rationale for being intentional with DE&I. I think it's really important. One of the misnomers I think is out there is that DE&I is a handout rather than a hand up. And I think both groups today did a really, really good job of showing how it is not a handout. It is a hand up. It's an incentive for what we're supposed to do. And I think that it would be, we all know, if paying attention to kind of a lot of what we're doing here in Frankfort, the war on the income tax rate is probably one of those guiding principles. If we're going to get to zero, we're going to have to do certain things. Basically everything that you all talked about. We have to have an educated workforce with higher ed, with certifications. We have to be making sure that our population is increasing and that we're engaging all facets of our population. Everyone's got to be pulling. We all got to be pulling on that rope. And I think that you all did a really, really good job there. And if we're going to wage a war on a 0% income tax rate, this has a seat at the table, clearly, without question. And I really appreciate that today. You really kind of gave me some talking points to be able to discuss that going forward. DE&I, it's socialism. And I get frustrated because it's like, no, there's value here, and I wanted to have more articulate points for them to help understand from my perspective, and you all provided those today. So I appreciate both groups today on that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative and Co-Chair. Thank you, Co-Chair. Yep, very much. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Watson, Mr. Daniels, thank you also very much for coming and making your presentation today. I have been critical of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce because of the issues with being able to move folk into the job market, and a lot of ex-felons that haven't had the opportunity. We have a lot of people out there. That's just one point. That a lot of people out there that have not had the opportunity to reintegrate into society and to be able to be useful, competitive, productive citizens. So I want to applaud you after some of the problems or the things that I've said about the chamber. Two things. The Shop Conscious Minority Business Certification events, I think, are starting to bear fruit. It's like the seed has been planted. And after the seed has been planted, it's people understanding and knowing that that seed will bear fruit at some point, and it takes time. So we had a certification event at the University of Kentucky at the Cornerstone, and it was well attended. And I think it's going to continue to bear fruit. And I think the University of Kentucky is doing a great job, and I hope all the other public institutions are doing the same. I applaud you on the Kentucky Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit, the second one that's coming up, October the 10th of this year. I may have missed it, but time, cost, and venue for that event.
Well, thank you, Representative Brown. And I will take all feedback, whatever you have to say. And so thank you for your support of our fair chance hiring. I talked about this a little bit earlier. In addition to our policy agenda around second chance hiring and criminal justice reform, we have a broad programmatic agenda as well. And we actually run a Fair Chance Academy that is training employers on how to be those second chance employers and connecting them with people coming out of incarceration or substance use disorder. And so thank you for that. The conference is on October 10th. It's in Louisville, and I'm not sure the cost, but I can get on the website, and then we'd be happy to talk. If anyone would like to come and would not have the financial means, we'd be happy to talk to them about it.
What is the venue?
Kentucky International Convention Center.
Okay.
Sorry. Had to think about that. We have a couple events coming up.
Okay.
And we'd love to have you. I think several of you guys are invited as well, so we can follow up with staff and make sure you guys get that invite.
Yeah, I would love to come. Thank you very much for the things that you've done. Mr. Daniels, you are a tenacious supporter of DE&I in Lexington-Fayette County with the Lexington Chamber, with Commerce Lexington, and I think we're moving forward. It has to be intentional, and I would be remiss if I did not bring this up. As we talk about DE&I, that the University of Kentucky and most of the institutions around Lexington and even the Commonwealth of Kentucky have a goal of 10%. And people are concerned about the 10%, and they ask questions about the 10% all the time, who are detractors of DE&I. But nobody ever asked a question about who gets the 100%. And it's about fairness and equity, and it's about leveling the playing field. So I just want to throw that out, to put that on record, that the people that are getting 100% is a concern for me, that there has to be room for other people inside the playground, if you will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, seeing no other members seeking recognition, we are preparing to move to adjournment, but before we do, I'm going to wear the hat of connector for just a moment. I had the opportunity this week to work with Singer Buchanan. Singer, would you stand, please? For those of you that may not know, Singer is the Executive Director of the Office of EEO and Contract Compliance. And so if you've not had the chance to be introduced to Singer and the work that they do in that office, I would encourage you, grab his hand as you walk out the door, introduce yourself, give him a card, make the connection. one of the things we can all do is what I referred to earlier about being ambassadors. And so let's not take that charge lightly as we leave this place today. Thank you all. We do stand adjourned until our next